Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. India's decisions on Jammu and Kashmir are the country's internal matter and have no implication for either the external boundaries of India or the line of actual control with China, External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar told his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi amidst Beijing's objection to the formation of Ladakh as a union territory. During his bilateral meeting with Wang, Jaishankar also said it was important to ensure that bilateral differences should not become disputes and emphasize that the future of the ties will depend on the mutual sensitivity to each other's core concerns. Meanwhile, Wang said, on the basis of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, we can have mutually beneficial cooperation. This is in the fundamental and long-term interest of our two peoples and also contributes to world peace and human progress, he added. India and China seem to have stepped back from allowing Kashmir to become an unmanageable irritant between the two countries. The two countries also signed 4 MoUs and agreed to organize 100 activities in the coming months. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the Sino-Indian bilateral relationship. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Sajanhar, former ambassador, Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, retired Director, India Foundation, and Zorawar Daulat Singh, Fellow, Center for Policy Research. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. Your thoughts and reactions to the Foreign Minister's visit to China.
A very timely visit, a very useful visit. Although it had been fixed quite some time ago, but I think the time that it actually occurred, I think that was very, very propitious and very useful. Why I say this is because it comes right after the decision that was taken by India as far as Kashmir is concerned, both in terms of abrogation of parts of Article 370 and also 35A, also dividing the state of Jammu and Kashmir into 2 union territories. And we have seen that, what are the sort of reactions that had been coming out of Pakistan. Also the fact that the Pakistan foreign minister made a dash to China on the 9th of August. And after coming from there, he made the statement that China is going to help us as far as the raising of this issue at the UN Security Council is concerned. Also on the 6th of August, we had seen 2 statements emanating from China. One as far as the change of status of Ladakh was concerned into a union territory, which the Chinese termed it as unacceptable. And the other was on the Jammu and Kashmir issue, 370, and saying that, they're watching the whole matter with concern. So I think in the backdrop of all these developments, it was an extremely timely visit, extremely useful visit. And Jaishankar, of course, he was there for ostensibly, technically, it was the second meeting of the high-level mechanism for cultural and people-to-people exchanges. We know that this initiative was taken last year when Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping had met in Wuhan in April. And then it was decided that to enhance, to sort of, give a kickstart, give a further impetus to the bilateral relations, we need to have more people-to-people exchanges. And the first meeting of that was held in Delhi last year in December. So this was the second meeting, and during this meeting, during this visit, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar met the Vice President, and he also met his own counterpart Wang Yi. So here I think a number of very concrete and specific issues were mentioned by the External Affairs Minister. Some of them you mentioned yourself. But I think just to reiterate, number one, that was a statement that was issued by our Foreign Office spokesperson when China had come out with the statement, number one, that this issue is an internal matter of India. It is a part of the Constitution, Indian Constitution, and it was a temporary provision. Article 370 was a temporary provision, and India has all the sovereign authority to change it, to abrogate it, and to take action. And it is not answerable to anyone outside. Number 3, what is the reason for which it has been done? Basically to improve governance and for socio-economic development of the state. And the third is in terms of, that if our bilateral relations have to improve, number one was the Astana consensus that was discussed between the two leaders in Astana in 2017,
Right.
which is that our differences should not be allowed to become disputes. And the second is that the future of the bilateral relationship will really depend, that will be predicated on the fact that the two countries are able to take provide sensitivity to issues, mutual sensitivity to issues of core concern to both of them. So
Right.
I think all these are matters that the External Affairs Minister very clearly laid out, and in that sense the message that it went out to China also was very clear. One last comment here. The External Affairs Minister also made it clear that when China is looking at relations between India and Pakistan, it should look at the realities as they exist on
Right.
the ground and not be just taken in by what Pakistan is telling it.
Sure, sure. So, Zaror, let me bring you into the picture now. So, how has the Sino-Indian relationship evolved over time, or at least in the recent past?
Right.
And what has changed really?
So I would say that this particular episode coming after this reorganization of J&K has actually been a test for this Wuhan spirit or Wuhan understanding that we've had. So if India today has more or less seen a China that has accepted this new reality, it is because it was preceded by a few years of rapprochement, normalization, trust building, which we've seen now is actually a reality. Because you'll recall that until 2018, we'd been through sort of a period of tension, heightened mistrust, led to a border crisis in Doklam. So there's been this sort of ebbs and flows, but certainly we are at a period of stability. Both sides recognize that larger global changes have brought them together as two rising powers in Asia that are providing some measure of order. South Asia, of course, China has a very important part to play. It's India's largest neighbor. What India did in this particular meeting is to reassure the Chinese that none of these actions that they've taken should upset a status quo state. So we would like to assume that the Chinese are also status quo in the sense that yes, we have a territorial dispute, but unlike Pakistan, we are not dealing with it in uncivilized, forceful fashion. We've got a particular process in place. The 2005 agreement has laid out this political parameters where it's going to be a political solution, a negotiated solution. It's going to cover all the sectors of our frontiers. And India has reiterated there is nothing new or any additional claims that have been made. We have a cartographic position, we have the LSC. Yes, there are differences within that, but more or less this is stable. So the real country that is upset by this is of course Pakistan, where you not only have a state that sitting on Indian soil, but is using that soil to further destabilize the territory that is part of sovereign India. So I think the Chinese saw, of course, there is a group now, if I step back and say that within China, within the Chinese establishment and the think tanks that possibly are a bit taken aback and by this development because this group, like many of their peers in the West, had become comfortable with a particular South Asia where India would remain bogged down in this part of the neighborhood. Its forces would be continually occupied and India would have no position to play any meaningful role in the rest of the subcontinent.
Right.
So for this group, it is a setback. There's no doubt about that. But there is a pragmatic official position and I think the writing is on the wall, as it is for many Western policymakers, that the balance of power is now changing both globally and regionally, and it has allowed India to finally take a decision which is in its national interest, something which has been belatedly put aside and set aside for many decades. So, and if China seeks regional stability, which I believe they do, I think they will come along, and they have come along. They have taken a principled position that they found it unacceptable. That's one of their statements. But in practice, we've seen they've not really gone and done anything of substance to support their strategic partner, Pakistan. They've accepted this reality, and that's a good development. But for those who had mocked the Wuhan summit 2 years ago as a meaningless exercise, that is simply a window dressing over deeper frictions, I think for them they've been proven wrong. We've seen that this particular episode, because it comes in the back of a larger stability in the relationship, has been dealt with in a mature fashion, which is precisely what leaders at that time in April 2018 had said, that we have differences, we're going to deal with them in a mature fashion and respect core concerns. This was India's core interest, and I think the Chinese have recognized that.
Certainly. You know, General, Chumar of 2014,
Yeah.
Doklam 2017. Have India and China now put that aside, moved on, and we are seeing a new Sino-Indian relationship going forward?
You know, when we talk of what happened at Chumar and later on what happened in Doklam, I think there was some sort of a lack of coordination within China itself, between the political authority and the military. And there are also reports that perhaps the military was trying to achieve a certain level of dominance or trying to put across their point of view. In a sense, perhaps even President Xi Jinping was taken by surprise. We don't know whether that is true or not, but that is one of the assessments. I think Xi Jinping has taken control now. He's got total control over both the political and the military establishment. So we can see both these wings now operating under greater levels of synergy. And I do not see a repeat of what had happened in Doklam once again. Perhaps one of the reasons is also that the Indian establishment, the political establishment, the diplomatic establishment and the military, they held firm onto a particular stand. And I think that was very important to convey a message both to China and to the world that we have a position and we will not escalate, but at the same time we are not going to bow back. Getting on to Wuhan now, you know, both my colleagues, I think I'm totally supportive of them, of what they have stated. I'll just go one step further. You know, when we talk of Wuhan, there was a very popular phrase which came out, the Wuhan spirit. And the External Affairs Minister has gone there again now. It was really in pursuance of the Wuhan spirit, what we can now call Wuhan 2.0, which will come about when the Chinese president visits India. So it was really to set the tone of that visit as to what is going to happen. Now, people were deriding this visit, as rightly said by my colleague just a few minutes earlier, that people were actually not very, they had made very sarcastic comments about Wuhan because it didn't have an agenda. But I think it is important that it didn't have an agenda because it allowed the leaders a free play and a free interaction, and that is what is going to happen in Wuhan 2.2. Now, one of the things which is very interesting, which has taken place now, is the Chinese statement. And while the Chinese statement, the interesting thing is that it only pertained to Ladakh. They left out the rest of the Jammu and Kashmir area, specifically because they were concerned about the Aksai Chin. Now, the Aksai Chin is an area which they occupied in the 50s, and now it has been merged with the Xinjiang province. Their concern really relates to the line of actual control which is running there, and which I do not think as of now is capable of resolution as of now. Perhaps it may be left, as one of the former Chinese presidents said, to future generations to solve. But just because we can't solve this particular issue now as a boundary dispute or as a territorial dispute, I think it is important to let things lie as they are, to maintain a measure of stability and to move ahead. The important thing which people must understand is that, as my colleagues spoke about, the shift of the economy. By 2020, more than 50% of the world's economy will be in Asia. That means basically we are talking about Japan, we are talking about China, we are talking about ASEAN and India. These are the major powers which will control more than 50% of the economy. And this is gradually increasing. So this shift away from the west to the east is a very dramatic shift. And I think it is important both for China and for India, being two very major players, to play their cards very cautiously.
Absolutely.
In this particular instance, when we are talking about the abrogation of
certain sections of
370 and of 35A, I think it has not been clearly understood by many people in China, and I don't blame them, because even the intelligence in India has not really understood the background to the problem, why it came in and why it was necessary for it to go. Correctly speaking, this should have actually been dealt with early, in the period between 1954 and 1957.
Sure.
It should have actually been eliminated at that point of time, but for whatever reasons, we will leave the history aside, it was not done. We had further opportunities to do so in 1971, after the dramatic victory of India over Pakistan in 1971. And after that, really, there was no opportunity till the first opportunity, I think, has come now, and we have seized that moment. I think it's important that moment has been seized. And now China must accept that reality. I think the world will accept that reality. China will certainly fall into line in view of the larger interests.
Right. Ambassador, taking the points that the General made forward, especially on the economy now, several economists, commentators and every analyst have said that this century is going to be Asia's century. Is this something that both India and China realize and understand, and they believe that working together is what is going to be in their best interest?
I think they do. I think they do, and that is why, all these meetings that have been taking place over the last so many years, starting from 2014, it was mentioned that, both the leaders have met maybe about 9 or 10 times. Even last year, they met about 4 times. So I think this additionality in terms of interaction, that definitely helps to clear many of the, misgivings or doubts or, things of that sort. I think both the countries do realize, and both the countries also do realize that they need to focus their energies on domestic economic growth, social development, rather than frittering away their energies. India definitely does realize that. As far as China is concerned, it has become rather assertive, rather aggressive. And we can see that. We of course saw that in Doklam. I take General's point, Dhruv's point, that such instances will not occur, but we cannot allow ourselves to be complacent, because we have a 4,000 kilometer long border, and there have been sort of so many reports that some sort of salami slicing keeps on happening. So we have to really be on our guard. We have to sort of improve infrastructure, improve our military readiness, preparedness, and so on and so forth. As far as some of the other issues are concerned, for instance, you look at South China Sea. Just now, when the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting took place, the East Asian Summit foreign ministers meeting took place again, meaning there have been the last few weeks and months have seen so much of aggressiveness on the part of China going into the exclusive economic zone of Vietnam, of Philippines, and of some of the other countries. So I think that being in that our own comfort zone and comfort level, that we are, we have to work together. So we should not be doing anything to sort of rock the apple cart, or say anything that is controversial or which is against the interest of China. I don't think that is the approach that we need to follow. We have to first of all protect our own interest. Why I say this is because all that was happening there, but India kept maintained its silence and peace as far as South China Sea is concerned. Although many of the countries of the ASEAN, we had launched the process of the Indo-Pacific, and in November 2017, when Mr. Trump was in this region. Now the ASEAN is also getting wary of the actions of China in terms of the manner in which it is capturing, creating control, militarizing, creating new islands as far as South China Sea is concerned, and they have also become much more vocal. But India also has a very critical interest there, and if we want a success as far as our Far East, Act East policy is concerned, I think we have to be present there in a more assertive manner,
right,
rather than sort of coming on later, because then it will all be looked upon as mere platitudes.
Sure. All right. Zorawar, as far as this issue of abrogation of certain sections of 370 is concerned, with S Jaishankar going to China and allaying certain fears that China had, do you believe that it's a closed chapter, since we said that the LAC is something that we are going to respect? Is China going to bring up this issue again, do you think?
So the Chinese, in their statement just after the press release, when they met Wang Yi, met Shah Mahmood Qureshi, had sort of talked about these UN Security Council resolutions, which as far as we are concerned is now history. They've been put aside. I don't see the Chinese embarrassing themselves by bringing it back into the UNSC, at least not in the stage or phase that we are in, because they will be vetoed out by at least one strategic partner that we have, I think the Russians. But let me step back and look at the bigger picture here. I think the forces of history, as is already been alluded to, is moving at a pace that is going ahead of the preferences of what India and China had become accustomed to in their bilateral relationship. It was incremental, gradual, tentative, keeping peace on the frontiers, but not really doing anything beyond a point on areas that you're finding common ground. I think now we're reaching that second phase. Maybe it's a little too soon to get there, but certainly the US-China dynamic, the way it's changing, the trade conflict, broader geoeconomic trends, Asia learning to survive by producing what it, consuming what it produces. It was this massive export house relying on the West. So all these broader changes, South Asia, we got so used to the United States being the main player in safeguarding basic stability. Even in the bilateral relationship with India and Pakistan, no matter what we say, we've become to rely on this factor. All these are changing, and now you're seeing India and China finding common ground on multilateral affairs, global governance, even on regional stability. And in fact, the leaderships are responding to these structural changes that are happening. Luckily, the Wuhan understanding is in place now to grow it and operationalize and give it some teeth or certain concrete sort of outcomes in lots of different areas. So I wouldn't even rule out in the next 5 years some sort of either an interim or a settlement on parts or not the whole of the India-China border. That's not beyond the realm of imagination, right? We are now dealing with a period of great uncertainty, and what has the past shown? Every episode when India and China found opportunities to settle some of their major differences came when broader global trends had put them in a position where they had to leave aside some of their problems and try and tackle areas. So even on the economy, you're talking of slowing down of the Indian growth rate, which is happening. China, of course, is already happening because they're having to restructure this massive export house, and they don't have that aggregate demand that they had in the West. So part of this is you should be more proactively grabbing or inviting Chinese capital to come in here, build up that. So there are plenty of opportunities now on the table. I just feel sometimes our frameworks are so sort of going back to a period where you could sort of, bide your time in the sense of developing the relationship. So I'm not saying put aside your differences. I'm saying you will have opportunities to even address some of the differences, but where you have common ground, you now move rapidly at a pace which you are not accustomed to. So you're seeing it on culture, people to people. Mansarovar, for example, you look at the Chinese, they're going out, they recognize that today this relationship is going to be built also from the bottom up.
Absolutely.
The people of India need to support this, because when you reach a tipping point, then the leaderships can frontally address their core challenge, which is India's position in South Asia and the border question.
Certainly. So, General, this brings me to my next question. Where does this leave Pakistan really? Because Pakistan has been relying on China heavily all these years, but China very clearly decided to leave out POK from, when they wanted to speak to Jaishankar about this whole Jammu and Kashmir issue, and stuck just to the Ladakh bit. So where does this leave Pakistan?
I mean, when you're saying they left out POK, I presume you mean both Mirpur Muzaffarabad and Gilgit-Baltistan.
Yes.
Right. So their concern was really the Ladakh region, which borders Aksai Chin, which is under the adverse possession of China now. No, I think Pakistan is in a very embarrassing situation as of now. But just before that, for 1 minute, I want to address that China question on the China-India relationship. You see, China has got one propensity, which Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar very correctly mentioned. You see, they will try to dominate. That is why it is important as far as the Indian standpoint is concerned to be always prepared. Now, this preparation is both military, economic and diplomatic. So, the question is, you cannot afford to be militarily weak or economically weak or diplomatically on the back foot. So long as you play the front foot game, then China is prepared to accept you on the main table. Once they realize that you're on a back foot, they will try to get on top of you. So, having said that, I think all these three things have been handled very well, and presumably we will continue on that path. Coming to Pakistan, I think they are in a very embarrassing situation now. Their foreign minister comes back and says that we've got no control, we cannot do anything in the United Nations. Now, that was a very serious admission as far as Pakistan is concerned, because Imran Khan on the 7th of August made some very outrageous statements in their parliament. In fact, he even threatened India with war, and obliquely he mentioned nuclear war, which I don't think behoves a head of state to really talk in that language. But suddenly they realized that if the UN is not with them, they sent their emissaries to the OIC. They found the OIC is not with them. Saudi Arabia is not with them, and they got further perturbed because Saudi Arabia intends to invest $75 billion with Reliance. So, the entire dynamics was changing as far as Pakistan was concerned. Russia is not with them. America is not with them. So, who is with them? except for some tabloid papers in Britain and certain other, the BBC and some other organizations, you find that they have been sidelined. So I think Pakistan needs to introspect a great deal. And I think the most important change which has taken place, and this change has been gradual, but it has taken place over the last 5 years, is the way both India and the world are looking at the state of Jammu and Kashmir. If you take your mind back to prior to 2014, whenever there was a discussion of that we will have talks on the Kashmir issue, the presumption was that we will have talks on that Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, which is with India. And it was presumed that what is with Pakistan, Gilgit-Baltistan and Mirpur Muzaffarabad is a de facto position. Today that has changed.
Absolutely.
Today it is a complete reversal. Today now, post 6th August, it is what India has is not negotiable. All that can be negotiated when we say we want to have talks on Jammu and Kashmir, it is really the meaning, India has made it very clear, we will talk on Gilgit-Baltistan and we will talk on Mirpur Muzaffarabad and how quickly you can return it. I think that is a very dramatic psychological shift and a shift in the Indian position.
Sure.
And I think Pakistan needs to be very worried about that.
All right, quick closing comments from all my guests. I've got limited time on the program, so I'm going to ask you to be brief. Ambassador, what's the best way forward for the Sino-Indian ties?
I think basically maintain contact at every level, and as was mentioned at the first Wuhan summit, maintain strategic communication. But here let me also come back to that, because when we are talking about China and India, China always keeps telling us that that's an economy 5 times the size of India. We are 2.7, they are about 12-13 trillion dollars. So in that context, I think the greater responsibility rests on the shoulders of China. It behoves the onus rests with them that they have to engender greater trust and belief as far as India is concerned.
Right.
While all their actions so far, whether it is stopping India's membership of the nuclear suppliers group, on Masood Azhar, it took us 10 years to go forward. I think at every step they have been creating obstacles around us.
Sure.
Sri Lanka, Maldives, everywhere. So I think they really need to act to build trust as far as India is concerned.
Right.
That is their greater responsibility. We should work towards that. Wuhan 2 would be a good opportunity going forward.
Sure.
But I think we will need to look at these indicators also coming from China.
Right. Zorawar?
So the fact that we have passed this phase, which perhaps a decade ago could have caused a mini crisis in the relationship, shows that not only India-China relations have attained a certain maturity, but the global balance of power provides India a certain space, a certain ability to pursue its core interests. Now, with that sort of opportunity, can we now transform this particular relationship and give it a broader regional dimension? I think we can.
Right.
One final point, the reorganization of J&K, I think it's been pointed out by some, even in China, has separated two disputes, the one with Pakistan and one with China, which all used to be under J&K. That allows us the possibility to now at least envisage a solution with China which isn't held back by the dispute with Pakistan. I think that's quite an important and significant development. It probably wasn't the cause of why India made this choice, but it's an inadvertent sort of a positive byproduct, because now you can contemplate a settlement on the India-China borders despite having a frozen status quo with Pakistan.
Sure.
And vice versa, perhaps.
Absolutely. General, close the show for us
I
with the
think
concluding remarks.
China still has that mindset, which hasn't gone away in all my interactions with some of these delegations which come here. They still believe that they are the one single tiger on that hill and there's no space for the second tiger. I think slowly and steadily, as India grows stronger, they will have to accept the fact that there is another tiger on the scene.
Right.
The faster they accept that, I think the better they will be. But for us, as far as India is concerned, I think we need to be, we need to extend the hand of friendship. Yes, Wuhan 2 will be a step in the right direction. We have a very strong political leadership. We have the people behind the government. So I think all these are positives. But at the same time, I think the economy has to grow, and there can never be any let-up in defense preparedness, because any let-up there will give China that window to actually assert themselves and try to impose their will on the country. So long as we maintain that system, I think we should be able to pull along in the years to come.
All right. All right, then on that note, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.